Cool. We should be live.
Awesome. Thanks, Joe.
Of course.
This is for folks joining us on YouTube. This is a meeting of the Node tooling working group. And present is Ben Coe and Joe Seppi and Ian Sutherland. And I'm going to start taking some notes.
Great.
Okay. Okay, so we have, do you want to just start going through the agenda, or does anyone have anything that's announcement-y?
Announcement-y.
Nothing for me.
I can't think of anything either. Yeah, I can't think of anything.
Okay, well, let's start going into the agenda then. First one is the contentious 116, which is the whether or not we should have some sort of linter or other mechanism for notifying folks about new features that we've added to core, like RimRaf or McDerp.
This is the hopefully less contentious issue.
I haven't seen the less contentious issue.
Well, yeah, in the previous one, I think I suggested in the issue using something like ESLint for this, whereas this one, we close that one and open this new issue to just as kind of a more general discussion, like, should we do this? How should we do this?
It's funny, though, that the first comment is we should do this in ESLint.
I haven't actually looked at it.
Yeah, that's the
Jordan.
That's the story of doing anything, trying to do anything.
Yeah.
He the one that said don't do this. And okay. Anyways, yeah, I haven't done anything else on this though. I'm still not sure what the path forward is.
I think.
Go ahead.
Oh,
Ben.
sorry. Go ahead, Joe.
No,
I was going to say a blog post, I think, is always a good call. Just kind of standardizing on doing that. But put that forward as a non-controversial recommendation.
Like as a way of highlighting some new features, or did you mean something else?
Yeah, no, whenever we put a new feature out, I think doing something on the Node blog is really, I've done that for a few of the things I've landed, and I think it's a good way to get attention and get people looking at it. It's one way to alert people.
Yeah. It's interesting. I can't remember when we talked about it maybe a few months ago, and Kai was there too from the ESLint team. But it seemed like we had decided that ESLint was maybe not the best place to do it. But I'm just not sure how to approach this. And we don't need to solve it today, but something to think about.
One of the issues with ESLint, for better or worse, is that you would have to install it in your project and install whatever like preset that contains these rules, right?
Yes.
So maybe that's not as discoverable because of that. But on the other hand, it lets people decide if they want to opt into it.
What if
we could do something? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, I'll just say real quickly. I mean, what if we created like some sort of NPM package that you run to check your code to see if your first person code, not your third party code, is calling things that we know we've implemented or something.
That's not a bad idea, actually. It could just be like you just npx run some tool and it would. Yeah. Kind of like that idea.
So then it's like sort of, we're providing a service. You opt into it. If you want to run it, you can run it.
It's like there are tools, like one that I use is called like dep check, I think, that will like, hey, here's some dependencies in your package JSON that you don't appear to actually be using.
Yeah.
So it maybe be kind of similar to that.
Yeah, exactly.
You were going to say
that sounds like a great idea. I like that idea. I was going to say, well, I like that idea a lot, and that seems really low-hanging fruit and non-controversial, which is really nice. Another recommendation would be if library authors could somehow opt into it, like if we were to land argument parsing in Node, I would happily put a warning in Yarg's parser that says, you know, are you sure you want Yarg's parser? You could totally just use the one built into Node.
Yeah.
And I feel like Isaac would be willing to do that for, I forget if he maintains, I think he maintains RimRaf. I think he'd be able to do that for, he'd be willing to do that for RimRaf potentially. So
yeah, that is something we've talked about before. I think we tried that with MakeDerp and were not successful.
Because of the authors, is that right?
Yeah. Substack was, yeah, not super. What was it I asked of Substack?
Yeah, I don't. This was a while ago. I don't remember his exact reasoning, but
it wasn't so much about that. It's more about, I think, him being like overly involved in the process of merging it into Node Core. And this was a couple of years ago, and I think Isaac has actually taken over McDerp now from James, maybe. So, I don't know. Having a little module seems low-hanging fruit, not controversial. If the module changes hands and we had approval from the prior author to add that deprecation notice, we don't end up in these gray areas where now the new author doesn't like the deprecation notice there. Like, yeah. So it seems like a pretty good idea.
I think it's worth at least like reaching out to package maintainers in these cases, and yeah, some might be willing to do it and some might not, and that's fine. If they are willing to do it, then great.
Yeah, we can think of it as a two-pronged approach. Maybe work on this package, but also encourage package authors where applicable to add some language as well, and then maybe some guidance for Node Core developers, when they do add something, to just be mindful of this process that we can help support them to use core functionality.
Yeah, I'm going to make in this PR here. Say like we discussed this in the tooling meeting today, and we've come up with this idea of creating like a standalone like little CLI that could point out these kinds of things.
Yep.
Okay.
Seems smart to me.
Yeah, that's something I could probably work on. I love making a good CLI.
All right, you volunteered. Yeah. Only you could use the new Node.js. We can move the CLI to the new Node.js parser when it's coming along.
Yeah,
that's great.
Oh, actually, we already have kind of the shim ready. Why don't you try it in the?
Is it ready though?
It does things, I think, or is it just a straw person?
It does things. It does do some things. Joe, I think you know the details there.
Are we talking about parsargs?
Does it do
enough
things?
It does something. Yeah, it's been a couple of months since I worked on it, but yeah, it was doing something.
I think you should try parsargs, because you were saying you wanted to contribute anyways, Ian, right? So then you just fix bugs if you bump into bugs.
Yeah, I do want to work on parsargs as well. So yeah, this would probably be a good chance for me to do some work in both of those things. So yeah, I'm on it.
Yeah, well, and then because I mean, the ideal to me would be we just eventually pick it up and drop it into Node from it being like a functional library on its own, right? So
yep.
Cool.
Right.
Then we can write a blog post about. I still think we should write blog posts about new features we add, but we can write a blog post about this CLI when it's ready.
Yeah, and I think we could even have that as one of the things that's outputted in the messaging. If you run this tool and it scans your code, it can say, this is native to core. Here's a blog post to read more about it or whatever,
Cool.
Yeah.
All right.
Sounds delightful to me.
I can put together like a little prototype or something in my own account, and then if we like it, we like this idea, we can maybe move it over to the like PKG.js org. Is that what we're using right now for parsargs?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's probably a good place for it. And if we do decide we want to go ahead with it.
Sounds good.
All right.
Cool.
So do you want to move on?
Yeah, sure. Were you making comments, Ian? Looks like you are.
In this issue, yeah, I was just writing something right now.
Cool. I may summarize and put it into the. Oh, you're writing in the issue. Got it. Cool.
Yeah.
Recursive copy. I sent an email to JP Richardson, who's the person who originally wrote FSExtra, along with Ryan Zim, who is the person who's been doing the most maintenance recently on FSExtra. And they both were supportive of us pulling in the copy functionality from FSExtra as a foundation for recursive copying behavior in Node. I was looking through that code base, and it's really nice and self-contained. So I think I was starting to take a stab at pulling it into Node, but didn't get super far. But I was going to take another stab this weekend, maybe.
Cool.
I was running into an issue where it wraps a bunch of helpers. Like it has kind of a util library that then the copy stuff relies on. So I think I need to figure out how much of that util library I need to also pluck across to. But then it seems possible, unless the util library then has its own dependencies it's pulling in. So as long as it doesn't turn into an infinite recursion where I pull in all of FSExtra to make it work, which I'm hoping. It's not looking like that'll be the case today. Like there's a bunch of helpers in a utility file, and then there's the copy method itself, which is pretty self-contained. So I think I can kind of do surgery and pull out just that functionality.
Cool.
But I'll need to spend a few hours actually trying. One thing that jumps out at me in this process was that they use, Graceful SFS, which I think is a library of Isaac's that does a few things differently than Node's built-in FS, but is a drop-in replacement. I was thinking of just using Node FS because I think some of the things, there's stuff in Graceful SFS that we want. Maybe we should even make a case for pulling this into Node, honestly. It says it fixes an issue. It fixes this issue of else chmod that was prior to Node 0.6.2, so we really don't care about that. I'm just reading what FS Graceful does.
Okay.
Retries reading a file if read results in EA again error. That's one we might want to consider just pulling into Node.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I'm going to try without the Graceful FS for the time being. The other question that came up is, so Node.js today, if we look at the Node.js file API, has what move file, or sorry, copy file, right? That's the existing method we have. I don't think there's a move file or a copy folder or directory. So I was thinking of adding a copy. There's a move file, or sorry, there's a copy file method today. I was thinking of adding this as copy, which would be like analogous to CopyDashR kind of behavior. And then the other question I had was whether we want something like move. I was tempted to start with copy. And if you want to move it, you can then call rimref recursive on the thing you just copied. But I kind of don't want to add two methods at once unless there's a good reason to.
Sorry, you're saying you could like call rimref to sort of emulate like a move type functionality?
Yeah, well, you can do a CopyDashR and then rimref the source location after a success. If you wanted to implement move.
Yeah, I mean, one, I guess, argument against that is like you could implement move like much more efficiently, right? By just actually like moving the thing in place, like by doing it that way, you're like duplicating everything. and then deleting one copy of it, right? Whereas like, I think a proper move implementation, the benefit there is that it would be like a lot more efficient.
How is move implemented in FSExtra?
That's a good question. I don't know. Because I know, like, I mean, I'm certainly no expert in this, but I know in like, you know, POSIX or like in Unix, like shells, right? If you move like a giant directory, it just happens instantly, right? Because it's not actually like.
Yeah, it's just changing. Yeah, it's just changing a pointer in a tree, basically, right?
Yeah, the metadata about where.
Yeah, it looks like FSExtra is smarter than just doing the remove. It only does a remove if you're moving across device, and otherwise it does
right
a rename operation. And the rename operation is, what does do rename do?
Oh, so I'm just looking in the, so there is a rename command in Node in the FS API.
Yeah.
So maybe that is.
So that's what people are asking for then. I think it renames if possible, but detects if it's across device where a rename won't work, and then does what I was saying where it just copies and removes if it's cross device. So I guess that's an argument for, yeah.
You're saying just make like this a little bit smarter maybe, or maybe there's like a move function that kind of wraps that functionality where like it'll use rename if it can, otherwise it'll do something a little more clever.
That's what FSExtra does in their move functionality. But I'm kind of tempted to start with copy still, I think. Because it also makes the code review simpler if it's just adding one method.
Right.
And then in the future, we can make a case for adding move as well, perhaps.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I do like the idea of like a move command. I could see that being useful.
Mm-hmm. Maybe we should open an issue for move.
Yeah, it's not a bad idea.
I'm tempted to start with copy though, because the use case I'm thinking of that this will be super useful for is you have a fixtures folder for some library that needs to interact with a directory structure of stuff. That fixtures folder is always there in your test directory, but as you set up your test, you do a CopyDashR of that folder, run your test against it, and then rimraf that folder afterwards because that's your teardown behavior. So I think that will solve a really useful use case. Whereas moves more, I mean, I see why move is useful too. Like at NPM, we would have, I don't know, maybe you drop files down in a temporary location, confirm they're correct, and then move them to their final resting place afterwards or something. That'd be really nice to be able to do as well. Of course, if you're setting that up in production, you're probably doing it on the same device maybe, and if you're copying it, and then you can do the rename, right? So anyways, yeah, so I think that to me, that works coming along pretty well though. I don't have too much more to add there. I think I could, depending on if I feel like coding this weekend or if I'm not feeling like coding this weekend, I might have a PR in the next week or two.
Cool. That'd be awesome.
Better way to detect process exiting. That one was on my plate too, and I've not done any work on this. Anyone else have a interest in this one?
Nothing.
Not at this time.
Yeah, nothing from me on that.
I was thinking about this one today, and it's like, now that I don't do as much work on like C8 or, well, now that C8 works, hopefully, I haven't checked how many open issues I have. And I don't do too much work on NYC. Like, I'm wondering if this is a general enough problem to keep on our plate. Like, it's not something, like, I don't find myself clamoring for it in my day-to-day work at Google, where I'm writing lots of open source libraries. I'm not wishing I could better detect the exiting behavior. Mm-hmm. I'm just not finding it's a problem I have too often.
Yeah, we could. I mean, we could close the issue, leave it.
I'm wondering if maybe we should. I'm wondering if maybe we should, unless someone wants to come in and champion for it.
I was gonna say we could maybe you could leave it open and just remove it from the agenda as well.
Yeah.
Why don't we do that for now? I'm just not like I can easily imagine why something like CopyDashR is useful to me, because I'm like, oh yeah, I'll have a fixture directory. I'll copy it. Like I can imagine the Node.js unit tests themselves using it quite a bit.
Right.
Whereas this one, I'm like, yeah, you can bump into really needing this function, but the few times you do that, you just put in the trouble to actually capture all the signals, and then it's the sort of thing you only have to do once, and you only have to do it if you're a utility. So maybe I've convinced myself it's off the agenda for now.
All right.
So we haven't really been moving that forward at all.
I don't know if it matters, but I was tempted to unassign Chris Hiller.
That makes sense to me.
Okay.
Something kind of related that I do actually want, and that is kind of like a pain point for me, is like an async exit hook type thing. I don't know if either of you saw, there was a thread on Twitter, I think it was last week. I think it might have been Tierney that started it. He was asking like, what are the, if you could have anything you wanted in like Node or NPM or whatever, what would it be? It's kind of an interesting thread. There were some good suggestions in there. But that was one that came up, and that's something, that oh yeah, there we go. Thanks, Joe.
You're welcome.
Yeah, there were some good suggestions in here. And I mean, the other thing, like some of the suggestions I was happy to see are things that we're actually working on, which was kind of nice. But yeah, that was one kind of, I just bring it up because, we're talking about like exit behavior. I know that's a hard one to deal with, right? Because you've stopped the event loop at that point. So like, how do you do async stuff?
Yeah, it's technically, I mean, I 100% agree it would make Node.js better, I believe, but I feel like it's a super hard technical problem.
Yeah.
Well, one of the other reasons people have pushed back on it, I think, is you can get in these situations. People who know better about this part of Node than myself we're concerned about getting in positions where the application basically never exits, or it doesn't exit gracefully because you're creating some sort of, you're not shutting down the event loop. You're waiting to shut down the event loop, and then you do things that can start to put more work on the event loop. I see Bradley just joined, so he's someone who can speak better to this than me. Hey, Brad.
Yeah, I got summoned by listening. So the event loop would be stopped running, but you can still run microtask queue stuff. So basically no IO jobs can be responded to. You could queue up things to flush to disk, that's fine. And behind the scenes, as long as after the microtask queue is done, no more IO is queued up, you should be okay. Other than that, Node just isn't set up to kind of have the process exiting while the event loop is running, if that makes sense. So you could do like a big chunked async write to disk, but you can't really read from disk, basically, is the problem, without us going and changing how exit behavior works across core.
Yeah, like as I understand it, even though you can see why it would be an interesting feature, it would be a pretty significant architectural rewrite of chunks of the system, right, Brad? Is that accurate?
It's not just chunks of Node core itself. It's also people expect things to kind of die. And so if you start doing things asynchronously, like should a server be kept alive during the state, even though the process may be exiting because it's in a bad state, like you want to manually shut down all the connections and stuff like that, because Node itself as a runtime doesn't know what's safe to keep responding to IO wise.
I feel like I'm a little worried about taking this on our agenda because it feels like it will be almost identical to that one I just suggested removing from the agenda, where we.
Yeah, I wasn't necessarily advocating for that.
Yeah.
Just it's a kind of a related feature.
No, I totally.
It's something that I would maybe like, although I don't know. It sounds like Bradley, were you saying this is the way that it works today, where like you can like flush things to disk and do things like that already, or?
Kind of. You can't use the microtask queue, but we probably could make it so the microtask queue promise awaits could finish.
I think
no
even
IO, no timers.
Yeah, I think kind of that would maybe be, I think like a case where this comes up, I think is like, you're trying to shut a service down or something and you're awaiting like a disconnect from a database or Redis or something like that.
So you can't await it, you can just queue it. So that's the problem. The disconnect requires IO, and that's not really set up to happen after process exit occurs. You might be able to work around it, but just the way things are architected right now, there's no isolation on what's kind of the dispose going on at the end of the process versus what was running during the main life cycle of the process. And so that's the bigger issue, I think. So all the IO that you're doing for your application, not your shutdown, like you have to separate that somehow. And then effectively cause the OS to pause whatever it was doing for a signal and then rehandle that or that kind of stuff.
All right, well, thanks for the insight on that one. Anyways, yeah, I wasn't necessarily advocating we take this on, just brought it up because it is kind of related. And also wanted to mention that Twitter thread. There's some good stuff in there. If you haven't seen it yet, I would recommend looking through it. We had another request for like a compile type behavior, like we've talked about in the past. Anyways, yeah, we can move on to the next thing though.
You're muted, Ben.
Why isn't anyone answering me? Maybe we can just take an action item to like read through this entire thread and potentially see if it inspires a few issues.
Yeah, it's probably worth dropping the link in the notes and get the ideas.
It stands to reason. Are we okay with moving on to the next item?
Yep.
So the next one is source maps. I landed the two bug fixes for it last week. I'm going to see if there's any new bug fixes or if my bug fixes created bugs. Just looking. Let's see here. I think we're in a good place though. Let's see if there's any outstanding ones. I actually remember what the tag is though. There we go. Source maps with a space. Oh, there we are. Cool. You know what? I'll actually paste this one into our doc so that I don't have to go through that.
So one side thing with source maps, it's not on the agenda yet, but with network imports coming along, we need to figure out the story there. We can do that in a different meeting.
Yeah, let me write a note down about that then. So this would be like loading source maps that are from a HTTP resource, or?
Yeah.
Okay. From an HTTP resource, not just a, oh, sorry, Brad, I'm not trying to talk over you.
HTTP, HTTPS, or potentially James Snell had blob URLs somewhere in his pipeline. Those also could get confusing because anything that's not off disk or directly represented on the source text itself.
So do these ultimately end up being in the module cache, like the loaded modules? They just came from a different, they didn't come from disk, they came from an HTTP request, basic, or HTTPS or HTTP request, yeah. Or a, gotcha. That makes sense. So I feel like we should be able to use most of the same machinery where we're populating the source map in the same cache that gets populated when we happen to find a source map on disk. We just would need to have that cache be populated in this part of the system that now loads these resources from something other than FS. So.
Yep. And I don't know if that's synchronous right now, but that would be asynchronous. Unless
the implementation is synchronous right now, but I mean, it's ultimately just putting stuff in a map. So there's no reason that something running asynchronous shouldn't be able to just use the same methods to put something into that map. I don't think shouldn't be an issue. Cool. So that's good to know future work. Maybe that means we just need to be keeping an eye out for when that work starts landing. Doesn't look like there's any, unless this is a new bug. Okay, doesn't look like there's any new outstanding bugs for source maps, but there continues to be some improvements where if anyone who happens to be listening on the call on YouTube, this could be a good place to start contributing to Node.js. There's specifically source maps don't work well in the REPL. So if anyone wants to play around with the REPL code, help wanted on source maps in REPL.
Yeah, and I think I said this last time, what does work well in the REPL?
I'm sure lots of things work well in the REPL. I use the REPL all the time.
I've been trying to use it more, and I've definitely noticed a lot of shortcomings in it. Sorry, I'm not trying to, be negative on any of the people that have put work into that. It's just I know it has some shortcomings, and it sounds like some of them are not easy to fix.
Yeah, like can you use it, like import in the REPL, for instance, or maybe now you can.
You can only use dynamic import.
Okay.
The function like.
So I mean that's.
You can't use import meta either. There's a variety of things you can't do. Await got unblocked recently, but it hasn't landed. But if you do use await, it invalidates other parts of like JavaScript, the language, because we're doing a source code transform.
This is what, yeah, that was the most recent issue that I ran into was there's no top level await, and I think there's a flag to enable it, but yeah, it breaks like you can reassign const all of a sudden if you enable that flag.
It sounds like maybe just a good way to put it is that great place to contribute to Node would be having more engineering help on the REPL, because it sounds like there's areas where it can be improved outside of source maps. So if people are looking for a way to get involved in open source, this could be a good experts wanted. We're on to my favorite topic, which is the argument parsing topic.
Yeah, no news. I should have more time next week. I just have been kind of juggling a bunch of things that are settled, but no news at the moment.
It sounded like Ian has an excuse to kick the tires as of 15 minutes ago, so.
Yeah, I'll definitely play around with it. It'll give me, like I said, I wanted to work on that anyway, so it'll give me a good excuse to try it out. I guess on that note too, I have no developments on this, but I just wanted to mention, brought it up last time. That could be an interesting thing for us to submit like a talk to NodeConf remote about. That CFP closes at the end of July, I think. So
I think so.
Yeah, so I mean, I'd be interested in doing that or doing that with someone else. I've not actually ever written a CFP before or submitted one, so if anyone has, I can probably use some help.
I've done tons of them, so I'd be happy to help.
Okay.
Happy to help write, review, speak, whatever you want.
Okay.
I would defer to you and Joe. I think I would rather sit this one out. Feeling like my open source time, I'd rather be writing open source these days, since so that's only temporary. But maybe once we're in, well, I don't. Will in-person conferences be a thing again? I don't know. Like, they are an environmental cost. I don't know.
I've seen.
Don't know what to expect in the next few years.
Well, didn't they say that OpenJS World next year is going to be in Austin?
Yep. It's already planned. I know there are some other LF events that are happening already this year. In October, there's like a open source something or other.
Yeah, I saw one that was happening in October too. I think it was like a React Atlanta conference.
Yeah.
I like the hallway track, and I find it a little hard online personally. But,
yes, absolutely. And there's totally like virtual fatigue happening right now. All the events that I'm a part of is like very low attendance.
I do really like that you can just go to all these conferences for free without having to go anywhere.
Yeah.
But I kind of agree. It's also not the same as being there. So.
That's a non sequitur, sorry, but I think it would be great for you to put in a Talkie in, and I don't know. Obviously, it sounds like Joe's up for it either way. So.
Yep.
I'll make sure that because it's only like 3 weeks away or something till the CFP. I'll make sure it's in my calendar so we don't miss it. And
maybe give Darcy a friendly ping too, because he did some work on the CLI, and just figure out between the three of you. Just so I think that's all the three folks who did the work recently, right? Is it?
I mean, I haven't really done anything.
Yeah. You expressed interest. You're about to write a CFP. That's work. So.
I haven't done anything yet.
Yeah.
And I guess like Roy was involved kind of like first time around, but he hasn't really been as involved this time. Anyways, I'll make sure. I mean,
it's still worth pinging him. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll make sure. Yeah, for sure. Even if we just get this submitted and someone else who's worked on it more wants to do the actual talk or something, like I'm fine with that. Although I don't know if they let you swap out speakers at the last minute, but
we're all friends.
Yeah, someone can just pretend they're me.
Great. So that brings us. We already talked a little bit about the thread.
Yep.
That Tierney put out. Any new business or anything we didn't cover?
Not that I can think of.
Cool. Well, we can end it there then. I'm excited to start doing a little bit of work on Copy Recursive. I'm hoping it's not too hard to drop in and at least get a conversation started about it. I guess I can just call it Copy because we don't have a corollary. We only have Copy file, so just be Copy.
Cool.
And
right, yeah, I think that makes sense. That kind of fits too with what we did with like the RM command, right? Since it offers like a little bit more functionality.
Maybe it should be a CP command since we have RM. I wonder if that'd be CP and RM. Maybe. I guess that's only if we actually match the behavior of CP exactly though. So I wonder if maybe that's signing ourselves up for more.
Yeah, be careful.
Yeah, it does feel a little ugly to have a RM and then Copy and not just RM and CP maybe. But
I don't actually remember, why didn't we call RM remove?
Maybe we should have. I don't know. Like, it is kind of like it's cute to use the Linux terminology, but I feel like it can be for users. It can be like an extra barrier of entry, right? So
right. Yeah. I mean, I guess we have like Rimder, kind of in keeping with that convention.
Yeah.
You can't rename it again.
No, well, we call it. We already have copy file, so copy feels really natural. Which would obviously copy a file or copy a directory structure.
Yeah.
Cool. We don't have to relitigate that.
Well, we'll see.
I have lost a video, so I think I'm gonna have to. I think my internet must be going out or something.
We'll see you.
Okay.
We're finished anyways, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks everybody.
Good weekend.